Hey, it's Dr. Pat here. We're looking at the third part of functions. So this introduction of function concept. So the one example that we're looking at now is piecewise functions. This is when we have the case we have multiple functions. We've got an x value and we have to figure out which formula to use. So we don't use the same formula for everybody. We use formulas for, everybody's got a different formula based upon whatever the input is. And taxes, it's a prime example of this. So this is from 2010, the tax rate schedule. If you're filing as a single person, here's the formula that we would use to calculate somebody's taxes. So let's take a look at, give some three examples here. So I've got a tax for, about 12,000, 56,000, 57,000 almost, and 62 million. So how would we calculate the tax for this income that we're looking on our tax returns? All right. So to do this, our first thing that we would have to determine is where does our taxable income fit? Okay, and so for this first example, 12,000, where does 12,000 fit? Definitely not in that first row, but it does fit between 8,000 and 34,000. So here's where 12,000 would fit in the second row here. Now that would be the 15% tax bracket. And so this would be our calculation for it. So automatically, if you're 12,248, what would happen is I would first take out, because it's about the amount over. So I'd first take out 8,375. So I'd take my 12,248, subtract the 8,375, multiply that by 15%, move it to the decimal place and do 0.15, and then calculate that and add $837. And so if I was a taxable income of 12,248, then my actual tax would be 14,1845. Okay, so that's what this table is all about. So let me try to do another one. So if my taxable income is about 57,000, my first step is to try and figure out, well, which formula, how do I calculate it? And so I figure out, where does 57,000 fit? Oh, looks like right here in the third row. So I would then take all my amount over 34,000. So I'm going to subtract out 34,000. So something like, what's that going to be? 22,000, somewhere around there, 23,000. And so I'm going to take that difference, subtract it out, multiply it by 25%, by 0.25, and then add this 4681.25. And that's where I'm getting the 10,426.75 for that tax. Now, if I'm got an income of 62 million, I wish, but if I did, how would I calculate that out? Well, I first have to figure out where 62 million fits. That would be here on this last bracket right here. I would subtract out 373,000 out of this, and then what's left over, I would multiply by 35%. And then add the 108,000, and this is where I get a taxable income of about, the actual tax of about 21 million. Okay, so about 22 million actually. Okay, so that's kind of what's happening with the tax bill. So that's what you see in the tax. The brochures that you can get from the IRS, go down to the library and you get up the packets. That's what you'll see. As a math person, here's what I'll be looking at. This is what we typically call a piecewise function. Typically the format of it. You got your function notation over here. I'm using the capital letter for T for my tax, and then I'm using X for the taxable income. And what you see over here on the far right is our inequalities. These are what we use to figure out, to identify which of the formulas I'm using here, because I got 6 formulas over here. And so not everybody gets calculated the same amount, depending on what your taxable income is. So that's what a piecewise function is. It's got multiple pieces to it. Our first step is always to figure out which of the formulas you use, because you cannot use all 6 at one time, because then it would no longer be a function, because then you would have 6 outputs. Remember, to be a function means you could only have one output. That means you could only use one of these formulas. So let's take a look at this. Now I'm going back to that one example. I've got a taxable income of 56,982. So my first step is to go over here to the inequalities and figure out where is my 56,982 number. It looks like it's going to be in this third row here, just like on the previous slide. Then I go over to here and I plug in my 56,982. So that's what I did. I took this formula and only this formula, only using one formula, because that's what it means to be a function, get one result. So I take that formula, I grab it out of there, and I take it over here, and I'm going to do my calculation. So where I see an x in that formula, I'm going to put my 56,982. I'm going to take the difference, because this difference here is about because I get 25% tax on the amount that's above the 34,000. So that's why we first have to do this difference and then multiply it by 0.25. My whole income, taxable income, is not taxed at 25%, only the amount above 34,000. The amount below 34,000 was taxed at two different rates, 10% and 15%. And so what happens there is this number right here, this 46,8125, this number represents how much tax on the income of 34,000. So this is my total tax for 34,000. That's why it's hanging around there. And doing this difference means I'm taking 25% of the amount that's above the 34,000. When we do the crunching out of this calculation, let's see what we get. We get a 10,426.75, which is what we got on the previous page. So piecewise functions, again, they're the idea here is that we have multiple formulas depending on what our x value is. But the catch is, to be a function, we can only use one of these formulas at a time in our calculations. So our first step whenever using a piecewise function is to identify which formula to use, and we do that by looking at the inequalities to the right. Once we pick the row, once we find out where our x value fits, we grab that formula from that row, and then you just go and do your calculations off to the side. So that's piecewise functions, just an example using taxes, very popular, an example that we'll all see. So hopefully this was helpful. Take care and see you around.